You're not lost because you lack talent. You've simply never been taught how to use your voice as a tool to change the way the world sees you. In seemingly small moments, a greeting in the elevator, a presentation in a meeting, a single opinion spoken in a crowd, what shapes the first impression is not your IQ, not your degree, but the way you speak. Your facial expressions might catch attention, but it's your voice that makes people stop and listen, or walk away within the first few seconds. That's not luck or inborn charisma, it's a skill, and skills can be trained. In a fast-paced society where people judge you within seconds as either credible or forgettable, speaking intelligently is no longer a bonus, it's a baseline requirement. You walk into a meeting, you haven't opened your file, listed your achievements, or even been asked a question, but within just a few introductory sentences, the person across from you has already made a quiet decision.
You're someone worth listening to, or someone they can disregard. Why is it that some people draw every eye the moment they speak, while others are ignored even when they're right? Because they speak clearly, with structure and presence. Not because they're better than you, but because they've trained a skill you once believed you lacked. This isn't just theory. Numerous studies, including those from Princeton and Harvard, have proven that humans form impressions of others within the first 200 milliseconds after hearing their voice. That means you don't get a second chance if you lose someone's attention right from the start. Tone, clarity, word choice, all of it forms your vocal signature. And that signature either opens doors or quietly closes opportunities you never even saw coming. Some people mistakenly think speaking intelligently means using academic words or sounding like a news anchor. No, speaking intelligently means speaking accurately, clearly, and most importantly, speaking truthfully without having to raise your voice. The more confident someone is in their thinking, the less they need to dress it up with flashy words. Their voice carries weight, not because of its volume, but because of the depth of meaning behind each sentence. This skill doesn't ask you to change who you are, to act, or to imitate anyone. It requires you to understand how the listener's brain works, that they listen because they feel guided, because they sense structure in how you present your ideas, because they believe you know what you're talking about and why it matters. Smart speakers don't clutter conversations with self-promotion. They steer them with clarity. You don't need a gifted voice to be sharp. You only need to master the art of pausing at the right time, choosing the right words, and conveying the right emotions. You don't have to speak much to be impactful. You just need every sentence you say to serve a clear purpose, to connect, to provoke thought, and to deliver a message others cannot easily ignore.
There's a truth that's often forgotten. Listeners don't judge you by what you know, but by how you express it. A brilliant idea, when spoken hesitantly, vaguely, or without direction, will be misunderstood as lacking value. Meanwhile, a simple thought, if delivered with confidence and clarity, can shift the decision of an entire room. The problem has never been the content you have, but how you turn it into spoken words. And don't confuse being natural with being careless. Smart speakers don't speak off the cuff. They rehearse, they prepare. They understand that every time they open their mouth, they're creating a new version of themselves in someone else's mind. They don't let opportunities slip away in a string of, like, or I'm not really sure. They respect silence. They know when to speak and when to stop, because they understand that in a noisy world, the ones who master restraint are the ones who get heard. Think of the leaders, speakers, and inspirational figures you've ever admired. They don't recite lines, they tell stories. They don't lecture, they lead thoughts. They don't scream to command attention, they just speak, and the world falls quiet to listen because they've turned the skill of communication into part of their identity. And so can you. All great change begins with one small thing: awareness. Once you realize that speaking well is not out of reach, but right in your hands, you begin to take control of how others respond to you. You don't need others to hand you credibility. You can build it, one word, one sentence, one conversation at a time. Instead of retreating when you feel like you can't speak well, you need to walk into that space with the mindset of a disciplined student. You read to know, you observe to understand, you practice to transform, and you don't wait for a stage to perform. You train in the smallest moments, in greetings and feedback and self-introductions, because you know that great communicators don't wait for opportunities, they create them with their own voice.
Your voice is not just a tool. It is a declaration of your thinking, and you can sharpen it like a sword, soften it like a breeze, or ground it like a rock, but only if you stop believing that you weren't born to speak well and start acting as if this is a survival skill, because it is. And at this point, you must ask yourself, if my voice can open doors, create change, and reshape my standing in any conversation, then what reason is left for me to delay training it even one more day? What makes people trust you isn't the volume of your voice, it's how their brain reacts to each sentence you utter. Neuroscience has shown that humans are not impressed by complex vocabulary. They're drawn to rhythmic clarity, to words that are easy for their minds to process and for their emotions to resonate with. The more coherently, purposefully, and rhythmically you speak, the more the listener's brain perceives you as trustworthy, intelligent, and credible. This isn't about the art of public speaking, it's a biological reflex. The human brain doesn't seek complexity, it seeks structure. When it hears a steady voice with natural pauses and accessible language, it releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter that creates a sense of pleasure. That's why you instantly like someone the moment they start speaking, or feel uneasy with someone who rambles, speaks too fast, or lacks pauses. It's not the content that puts people off, it's the way their brain is forced to work too hard to keep up. And in an age where attention is a precious currency, anything that makes the listener work to understand is quickly dismissed. Neuroscientists at the University of California found that the brain receives language more effectively when it's delivered with steady rhythm, natural intonation, and well-placed pauses. This explains why top TED Talks are never rushed. The speaker controls not just pace, but emotional flow. They know when to lower their tone to build trust. They know when to pause, not because they're hesitant, but because they want you to feel the weight of what was just said.
You don't have to speak slowly, but you must give your message space to sink into the listener's mind. A short pause after a powerful statement isn't a lack of confidence, it's strategy. A well-timed silence is the weapon of the smart communicator. It makes the listener stop scrolling. It forces them to think, to feel. And what the brain is forced to pause and process, that is what it remembers. Tone is the outer layer that wraps your message. The sentence, "I'm fine," can have 10 different meanings depending on the tone. If said in a deep, slow voice, it conveys certainty. If said in a high, quick tone, it carries anxiety. Your voice doesn't just deliver information, it delivers emotion, and emotion is what shapes reaction. Smart communicators know how to choose a volume that's not too loud or too soft, just enough to be present without being overbearing. They know how to gently emphasize key words to guide the listener's brain exactly where they want it, like a guide pointing the way without needing to push. A single sentence, when stressed on different words, can completely change its meaning. I never said she took the money. Try emphasizing each word in turn and you'll find at least 6 distinct interpretations. Smart communicators don't just say the right thing, they shape the listener's perception by choosing which words will be highlighted in memory. They speak less, but every word they choose carries weight. Beyond words, even your breath and sentence breaks convey meaning. A rushed breath makes the listener feel your tension. A deep, steady breath makes them feel safe. Your voice is a direct channel of emotion into the other person's nervous system. You cannot inspire trust if your voice is shaky.
But if you know how to regulate your breathing,
your voice will stabilize. And once your voice is steady, the listener senses your presence and starts to truly listen. Think back to Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, "I have a dream." No one remembers every word of that address, but everyone remembers the rhythm of how he spoke. It wasn't an innate gift, it was a deep understanding of cadence, tone, and human emotion. His voice didn't just come from his vocal cords, it flowed through his feelings, carrying belief, hope, and certainty. And that's what etched itself into history. Another study from Harvard showed that people who speak slightly slower, with intentional intonation and timely pauses, are perceived as more intelligent and trustworthy than those who speak quickly and without control. You don't need to drag out every word. You just need to give each message enough space to breathe, to live in the listener's mind. Rushing doesn't create inspiration. Calmness makes people stop and pay attention. And here's the key point. The listener's brain doesn't care about your credentials or your achievements. It only reacts to how you speak. When your voice is clean, with clear emphasis and emotion conveyed correctly, you no longer need to prove anything. Your voice itself becomes the reason people believe in you. Start with 3 core principles. First, speak a bit slower, not to fill time, but to allow the listener to keep up with your thinking. Second, emphasize key words, not to embellish, but to guide attention. Third, know when to pause, because silence can sometimes carry more impact than words. This is how you create music in communication, something that pleases the brain and opens the heart. It's not a beautiful voice that makes you seem more intelligent to others. It's how you use your voice to stir emotion, to organize thought, to guide the flow of conversation. And if you master that, any room will fall silent the moment you begin to speak.
Smart communicators don't use words to show how much they know. They use words to help others understand what truly matters. Because brilliance in communication doesn't lie in how many complex terms you can use, but in the ability to express deep ideas in simple language. That's not just a skill, it's the pinnacle of intelligence. Only when you fully grasp something can you explain it clearly, understandably, without dressing it in layers of flashy jargon. There's a quiet misconception leading many people astray. They think speaking intelligently means sounding like they're lecturing a panel of scientists. They try to insert technical vocabulary, academic phrases, and long-winded sentences that force the listener to guess the main point. And they don't understand why, despite being factually correct, their words fail to connect. The reason is simple. They exhaust their audience by making them work too hard to understand what should have been presented in the most natural way. Albert Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Sharp thinkers always aim to make their message concise and accessible. They don't speak to impress, they speak to convey. And that, more than any intellectual display, leaves a lasting impression. Instead of saying cognitive stratification leads to phase dissonance in interpersonal communication models, the intelligent speaker simply says, when two people think too differently, they don't understand each other. Same meaning, but one makes the listener feel like they're taking an IQ test, while the other makes them feel understood and open to learning. Simplicity doesn't dilute depth. On the contrary, it opens the door for understanding to enter. Words are tools. If you use them as walls, people stay out. If you use them as bridges, people step forward. So ask yourself, are you building walls or bridges with your words? Simplicity is not laziness. It demands sharper thinking, more refined choices, and the discipline to strip away anything unnecessary. Like a sculptor who doesn't create masterpieces by adding more, but by chiseling away the excess. Look at the world's most powerful communicators, inspiring leaders, speakers, authors. They don't speak in riddles, they speak with precision. They choose short, clear words that hit hard. Their sentences don't exist to showcase themselves, but to unlock something in the listener because they understand. You don't need a dictionary to change someone's life. You need one sentence that hits where thought and emotion intersect. One of the most common mistakes is overusing specialized language under the false belief that it increases personal value. But in reality, using overly ornate words in everyday conversation only alienates the listener. Communication is not an academic contest. It's a journey of connecting minds. And when a mind is mature, it doesn't need sugarcoating. Great communicators don't talk long, they talk right. They don't use 10 words to express one idea, when 3 precise words will do. They're not vague, not convoluted, and they don't decorate their message. Every word they choose has weight and purpose, and that makes every sentence an arrow aimed straight at the listener's mind. No detours, no distractions. Here's the deal. To train yourself to speak simply, start by listening to yourself. When you're about to explain something, ask, is there a shorter way to say this without losing meaning? Replace, I would like to express my personal perspective on the topic under discussion with, I have a thought to share. Swap from a long-term strategic organizational standpoint with, in the long run. You're not sacrificing professionalism. You're making your words more accessible and memorable. And don't forget the power of strong verbs. Instead of saying, he made a decision, say, he decided. Instead of, she proceeded to provide assistance, say, she helped. Every time you cut an unnecessary word, you sharpen your message. Smart communicators don't try to say more. They learn to say less with greater impact. Imagine you're explaining a concept to a 10-year-old. If you can't make them understand, it's not because they lack intelligence, but because you lack clarity. And in communication, clarity is the strongest weapon. You can say 100 clever things, but it's the one sentence that's simple and perfectly timed that will stick in the listener's mind. Simplicity doesn't make you seem less intelligent. It makes you easier to understand, easier to trust, and easier to remember. In a world overwhelmed by information, it's clarity that makes people pause. And the person who can express something profound in humble words holds a quiet kind of power, the power of true understanding. A message, even if true, will vanish from the listener's mind like a wisp of smoke if it lacks structure. On the other hand, a simple sentence, when tightly organized, will remain as an unforgettable imprint. This is because the human brain doesn't just hear with the ears, it receives through logic. And logic requires a journey to follow, a beginning, a climax, and an end. That's why intelligent speakers never let themselves drift with inspiration. They don't spill everything on their mind at random, and they design their words like an architect builds a house, with a firm foundation, a clear framework, and each part serving one ultimate goal: to create impact. Doesn't make you rigid. On the contrary, it's the skeleton that allows you to be flexible without losing control. It keeps you from rambling, from repeating yourself, from falling into the trap of talking but forgetting what you just said. A conversation can be short, but if it has a clear beginning, middle, and end, the listener feels guided. Meanwhile, a long-winded talk without direction only drains people and is forgotten within minutes. You don't need to speak a lot to be memorable. You need to speak the right way so your message stays alive. The simplest yet most effective model is introduction, main content, conclusion. The introduction sets the stage and grabs attention, and the main content delivers the message. The conclusion reinforces what matters or prompts action. This isn't just theory, it's the structure used by presidents in speeches, by CEOs in strategic summits, and by lawyers in court, because it aligns with how the brain processes information. The 3-part structure creates a sense of completeness, logic, and memorability, the 3 elements every message must have to be impactful. Imagine you're asked, what does leadership mean to you?
If you respond emotionally, hastily, without direction, the listener will lose the point within seconds. But using the open, body, closed structure in just 3 lines, you can say, leadership isn't a title, it's influence. A true leader listens, leads by example, and inspires through consistency. To me, leadership lies not in position, but in the values you pass on. Clear, concise, impactful structure achieves what 10 messy sentences cannot. It turns an idea into a message with weight. That's another highly effective strategy, is the rule of 3. The human mind is drawn to groups of 3, not too few to be vague, not too many to overwhelm. Try saying, I believe this idea has potential for 3 reasons. It cuts costs, it scales easily, and there's real data proving its success. You're not just being clear, you're giving the listener a sense of certainty. 3 reasons feel solid and rarely provoke skepticism. The rule of 3 is everywhere, in slogans, in fairy tales, in politics, because it hits the sweet spot of the brain's information filter. Another technique that helps you stay focused is using signposts, phrases that guide the listener on where you're going next. For example, let me explain. This matters because there are 2 things you need to know. These small signals create a sense of organization, direction, and reliability even before you dive into the main point. The listener doesn't have to guess what you're talking about. You lead them step by step, and that's how you keep them with you until the very end. One of the most powerful structural tools is storytelling. A short, timely, personal story can convey a complex idea without needing 10 arguments. Stories let the listener see themselves, connect emotionally, and enter a space of empathy. But a story only works if it's tightly connected to the message. You don't tell stories for the sake of telling. You tell them to lead into a lesson, a value, an action. The story isn't extra, it's the guide. Even in formal situations like strategy meetings or job interviews, structure is the map that keeps you from getting lost. Under stress, many people repeat themselves, ramble, or drift off topic. But if you're used to structured thinking, you'll know where to begin, what to present, and how to wrap it up.
That doesn't just show professionalism, it shows depth of thought and respect for the listener's time. Even when you just want to share a quick opinion, pause for a second and ask, what's the core point? How can I make sure the listener remembers this after I stop speaking? You don't have to sound like an orator, but you do need to speak like someone with a purpose. Structure helps you do that. It doesn't limit your creativity. It protects your message from becoming blurry, chaotic, and forgettable. You can start practicing structure today in small conversations, moments of feedback in group discussions. Instead of starting with, I think, try, there are 3 things I'd like to share about this. Instead of circling around, say directly, the main point here is. And when you finish, don't leave it hanging. Land it with a clear emphasis. So the most important takeaway is, each time you apply structure, you're not just improving your skill, you're building the habit of ordered thinking, a habit that will elevate every conversation you have. Speaking with focus isn't something that comes naturally, it's the result of training. And the person who masters it isn't just a good speaker, they're someone who leads others thinking with each clear, deliberate step. In a noisy world, the one who speaks with clarity will always hold the advantage because they don't just transmit information, they inspire others to take action. People often assume confidence is something you're born with, as if some are naturally able to stand firm in a crowd, speak fluently without trembling, or voice opinions even in the face of doubt. But in reality, confidence isn't a random gift reserved for a select few. It's the result of conscious repetition, of facing your own inner fears and choosing to move forward even when certainty is absent. Confidence doesn't fall from the sky. It's built, forged bit by bit through disciplined action.
A speaker who carries weight isn't someone who's never been nervous. They're simply someone who has learned to manage that feeling. They don't wait to be fully confident before they speak. They begin while still unsure, and every time they do, they take one more step toward steadiness. You don't need to feel strong before you speak. It's speaking while you're still trembling that actually makes you strong. Your voice doesn't reflect how you feel, it reflects how much emotion you're able to regulate. When you adjust your stance, square your shoulders, keep your spine straight, and meet others' eyes without flinching, even if your palms are sweating, your body sends a signal. I'm present, I'm not hiding, I deserve to be heard. And something strange happens. As your body starts to express confidence, your mind slowly begins to believe it. Confidence doesn't only rise from the inside out, it also flows from the outside in. Act like a confident person and you become one. But body language isn't the only factor. Your tone of voice is a clear indicator of your internal state. People lacking confidence often end their sentences with a rising pitch, making their statements sound more like questions than declarations. They rush through the important parts or fill silence with meaningless fillers like, kind of, I think. It's not that they lack ideas, it's that they hesitate to give full weight to what they mean to say. Meanwhile, confident communicators gently lower their tone at the end of a sentence, as if placing a period on something they've already validated. No need to raise their voice, no need for theatrics, just a firm, unshaken cadence asking no permission. Fillers are the silent enemies of confidence. They slip into speech whenever you're unclear or feel the urge to fill the space. But silence isn't a weakness. In fact, it's the signal of someone who has control. A 1-second pause before answering makes the listener feel that you're thinking. A pause after a strong sentence doubles its impact. People who lack confidence fear silence.
Those with presence use it as part of their language. Confidence, like any skill, cannot live only in your thoughts. It must be trained through action. Start with small wins. Offer feedback in a meeting. Ask a clear question in a large group. Record your voice presenting an idea. Play it back, not to criticize, but to refine. Each time, you're gradually building a new reflex map in your brain, the map of someone who's no longer afraid of their own voice. A powerful tool for cultivating confidence is visualization. Before a crucial moment, take a few minutes to close your eyes and imagine yourself speaking clearly, calmly, with impact. Feel your body standing firm. Feel the gaze of others listening attentively. Visualization isn't daydreaming, it's how you rewire your nervous system, helping it perform better in reality. The brain doesn't strongly differentiate between vivid imagination and lived experience. If you see yourself succeed enough times in your mind, your body will begin to act as if it's already familiar. And yes, there will still be moments you tremble. Your hands may still go cold, your throat might tighten. But rather than seeing those as signs of failure, see them as proof that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. All expansion comes with tension, but those with resolve don't retreat because of it. They keep going and let their action redefine who they are. Most importantly, don't wait for others to validate you before you begin trusting your voice. Self-belief cannot be borrowed, it must be built from within. Every time you dare to speak up for what you believe is right, even if others disagree, even if your voice isn't perfect, you're reinforcing the foundation of your real presence. People aren't moved by polish, they're moved by focused authenticity.
Confidence isn't a feeling of ease, it's a commitment to show up even when things feel uneasy. And if you're willing to train, if you're willing to endure the initial discomfort in exchange for long-term stability, you'll realize you no longer speak to ask for permission to exist. You are fully present in every sentence, every breath, every moment. Great communicators aren't the ones who speak the most, but the ones who know how to listen. In a world growing louder with people trying to speak faster, longer, and more impressively, the person who's willing to sit down and truly listen becomes rare, and that rarity holds immense power. Listening is not passive silence. It is a deep form of presence where you set aside your ego, suspend the urge to reply, and make space to truly understand what's unfolding within the person in front of you. And it's that unspoken empathy that earns you more respect than any sharp argument ever could. People often admire good speakers, but in reality, they trust good listeners. Because when you listen well, you're not just receiving information, you're sending a message. I see you. I understand you. I'm not here to win. I'm here to connect. That's the sense of safety every human seeks in communication. Whether it's during an interview, a negotiation, or a casual conversation, what makes listening special isn't that it helps you stay quiet, it's that it helps you respond meaningfully. A skilled listener doesn't nod out of politeness. They analyze tone, sense emotion, detect what hasn't been said. They don't rush to argue before fully understanding. They don't wait for the other person to finish just to insert their own view. They observe, they receive. And that's why their responses carry depth, connection, and make the other person feel truly heard. When you genuinely listen to someone, you're giving them a gift very few ever receive, the space to be fully themselves. In the workplace, this creates loyalty. In relationships, it builds attachment. In social interactions, it creates magnetism, without showmanship. People who've been deeply listened to remember the feeling, and they always want to return to that connection. Smart listening also conserves your energy. Instead of reacting from instinct, you respond with awareness. When someone criticizes you, instead of becoming defensive, you can pause and ask, I want to understand what specifically is upsetting you. A single question like that can diffuse tension, shift the course of the conversation, and open the door to mutual understanding. Those who lack listening skills often get trapped in avoidable conflicts. Those who listen well move through tension with calm, and because of that, they remain in control. In interviews, the best speaker isn't the one who lists the most achievements, but the one who stops to listen and identifies what the employer is truly looking for, then responds strategically. In sales, good listeners don't pitch from a script. They sell with intuition, hearing the unspoken needs. In personal relationships, deep listeners make others feel seen, and that sensation is stronger than any gift. Listening is not waiting for your turn to speak. It's being fully present in the moment. Put down your phone, look up, make eye contact. Listen not just with your ears, but with your eyes, your attention, and your emotional awareness. And when they pause, don't rush to reply. Reflect with a simple sentence. So what you're saying is, or I hear you, that must be a lot to deal with. These are not argumentative responses. They are affirmations, and they heal more than any defense ever could. Someone may be articulate and eloquent, but without the ability to listen, they will soon burn out in communication, because no one wants to talk to a person who's just waiting for their turn. Smart communicators use 50% of their energy to observe, 30% to sense, and only 20% to speak. That's why every word they say lands, because it's born from understanding, not the need to perform. If you want to begin building this skill, try it in small conversations. When someone speaks, stay silent and give your full attention to their rhythm, emotion, and the meaning behind their words. Don't interrupt. Don't offer advice too soon. When they're done, respond with something that shows you truly heard. Nothing fancy, just something honest. Then, if appropriate, ask an open question. Would you like me to share my thoughts? Just asking that creates a sense of respect, a form of soft power that few know how to wield. The world isn't short of great talkers, but it's deeply lacking in deep listeners. And that's why listeners always hold a special place. They're not loud, yet people remember them. They don't seek to win, yet they earn trust. In communication, sometimes you don't need to say a word to be heard. You just need to listen to be remembered. It's not weak ideas that strip away your influence. It's how you water them down with unnecessary words. Phrases like, "I just think that," "This might sound silly but," or "I'm not entirely sure but," don't appear because you lack information. They appear because you haven't yet trusted yourself enough. And every time those phrases slip out, you're silently apologizing for your presence, lowering your value before anyone even has the chance to respond. That's how many talented people unknowingly turn their voice into a faint, forgettable echo. Smart communicators don't ask for permission to speak. They speak with respect, first and foremost for themselves. They don't fill space with kind of, or basically, because they understand that silence carries more strength than meaningless sound. These filler words aren't a linguistic problem. They're symptoms of internal uncertainty. When you don't know exactly what you want to say, you buy time with noise. And it's that very noise that makes listeners tune out.
Imagine someone presenting an idea in a meeting. I just wanted to share something. It might not be very clear, but I think maybe we could kind of try another way. The content might be valid, but the voice lacks conviction. Every word is wrapped in defense. Every sentence waits for approval before daring to continue. Now, compare that to someone who says, "I propose we try a different approach. Here is why." The difference isn't in the data, it's in who commands their language. Weak language doesn't just show up in fillers, it hides in your openers too. The phrase, "I'm not an expert, but," immediately cuts your authority in half before you even begin. This might sound a bit silly, but is self-sabotage in disguise. Ask yourself, are you sharing an idea or apologizing for its existence? Those who speak with impact aren't always right, but they're not afraid of being wrong, and because of that, they don't start with retreat. Instead of saying, "I just have a quick point to add," say, "I have one more point to contribute." Instead of, "I think maybe we could try," say, "I suggest we try this approach." These might seem like minor swaps, but they mark the line between someone hoping to be heard and someone others want to hear. Clarity doesn't come from content, it comes from how you bring that content into the open, without hedging, without softening your presence. Those who communicate powerfully don't try to sound impressive. They speak cleanly, they cut the excess, strip away the padding, and keep only what's necessary and strong. They don't use language as a curtain to hide insecurity. They use it like a precise blade to land in the listener's mind without ever needing to shout. And because of that, every sentence they speak hits directly. To do this, you must begin with awareness. Record yourself speaking in meetings, in presentations, or just when explaining an idea. Then listen back, not to criticize, but to identify. Which words do you repeat unnecessarily? Which phrases drag on out of fear of silence? Only when you hear how you sound can you start shaping how you truly want to speak. The next step is mastering the pause. When you feel your thoughts aren't fully formed, instead of filling space with take a deliberate breath and stop. A purposeful silence signals thoughtfulness, not awkwardness. Smart communicators don't fear the gaps, they use them as part of their message. You can also craft stronger openers for yourself. Phrases like, "I believe that," "My view is," "I recommend that we." These aren't about commanding others, they're about anchoring your presence through words. When you begin a sentence with certainty, listeners are more likely to believe what you're about to say, even before hearing it. People won't remember what words you used, they'll remember how you made them feel. And no one feels trust when you keep apologizing, backing down, or shrinking your presence in every sentence. It's time to stop using language as a shield and start using it as a mirror reflecting the clarity of your thinking. Let every sentence stand upright, not leaning on fillers, not dodging, not asking for permission. Because in the end, not everyone has a brilliant idea, but everyone has the right to have their idea heard as long as they don't weaken it with their own words. People may listen to you because of how you speak, but they will only remember you if they feel the truth behind your words. In a world saturated with polished speeches and well-rehearsed scripts, a genuine voice feels like a breath of fresh air. You don't need to speak perfectly, you need to speak in alignment with who you truly are. When your words step out of the comfort zone of what's appropriate and enter the honest territory of what you actually think and feel, that's when you reach the most human part of your listener and leave a mark far deeper than any speaking technique ever could.
Authenticity doesn't mean revealing everything. It means choosing what's most true to you and bringing that into the conversation, without wearing a mask to please others. Intelligent speakers don't try to sound profound, don't force a quote to sound wise. They speak from real experiences, real wounds, real mistakes, and that's exactly why listeners trust them. Because deep down, everyone can sense the difference between someone performing and someone who's truly present. You don't need to become a perfect version of yourself. You just need to be you, but the aware, intentional version. When you say, "I don't have all the answers, but here's what I've learned from my own mistakes," you don't diminish yourself. On the contrary, you show an inner steadiness, a place where you don't need to hide imperfection to be seen. People don't demand that you're always right. They just need to know that you're real. And often a flawed but sincere message is more persuasive than a speech polished into emotional sterility. Authenticity also lives in your natural voice, not in trying to imitate someone else. A deeper pitch doesn't make you more credible. Speaking faster doesn't make you more decisive. What makes people stop and listen is your unique rhythm, a rhythm that carries not just words, but your spirit, your emotions, and your personal values. Charismatic speakers aren't compelling because they fit a perfect mold. They're compelling because they speak with a voice that hasn't been filtered for mass approval. Being authentic is not the same as being careless. It's the clarity to express what you think without disguise, while taking full responsibility for its impact. Authentic people aren't reckless. They don't say everything that crosses their mind. They say what they believe, with respect for both themselves and their listeners. And that's why their words don't wound. They open up space for deeper understanding.
Here's an unexpected truth. The moment you stop trying to impress, you start to influence. Because at that point, you're no longer trying to sell something. You're simply sharing something you've lived. And in that flow of authenticity, your listener doesn't feel manipulated. They feel connected. And connection always precedes action. You don't need a dramatic, emotive voice. You need a message that truly lives inside you. You don't need to speak like a keynote speaker. You need to speak from experience that has matured in your own mind. So instead of talking about what you think others want to hear, begin with what you need to say. A story that changed you, a failure that made you question yourself, a lesson that hurt but grew you, a spirit of simplicity. When you speak from a heart sculpted by lived experience, your words don't need to be long. They'll still linger. Remember, people won't recall every detail you said, but they will remember how you made them feel, and that feeling comes from the alignment between your words and your presence. When your speech, your eyes, your breath, and your energy all say the same thing, people can't help but believe you, because they're not just listening with their ears, they're listening with their intuition. And intuition detects authenticity more clearly than any microphone ever could. Authenticity is also your declaration. I don't need to be like anyone else to have value. You don't need to change your tone. You don't need to alter your vocabulary. You just need to adjust your intention. Are you saying this because you believe it will make a difference? Are you saying it to fit a mold? Once you stay loyal to your real intent, even if your delivery isn't flawless, even if your hands still shake, you will be heard. Authentic speakers don't control the room with tactics. They lead it with courage. They don't wow people with knowledge. They earn trust by having the guts to live and speak in alignment with who they really are. In a world where everything feels overly curated, truth, raw but graceful, becomes the most powerful differentiator.
A person's communication skill isn't revealed when everything flows smoothly. It's revealed when the air tightens, the heart rate spikes, the throat dries out, and all eyes turn toward you. High-pressure moments, the job interview that determines your future, the big presentation before senior executives, the difficult conversation with a colleague, or the response to an unfair criticism. These are when your voice carries more than just words. It becomes a reflection of your inner strength. And the difference lies in one deceptively simple thing: preparation. Smart communicators don't wait for ideal circumstances. They prepare to stand steady in challenging ones. Because when pressure rises, you can't rely on logic unless you've trained your mental systems ahead of time. In moments of stress, you don't rise to your level of intention, you fall to your level of preparation. And that's what separates composure from chaos. Preparation doesn't mean memorizing answers. It means clarifying your goal, organizing your thoughts, and training the reflex of calmness. A good speaker under pressure walks into the conversation with 3 anchors clearly defined. What do I want this person to understand? What do I want them to feel? And what is the outcome I aim to achieve? When you have these 3 in place, you're not pulled around by emotion. You enter the moment with intention, not to control everything, but to remain present regardless of what unfolds. Before a presentation, don't just rehearse content, rehearse emotional steadiness. Close your eyes and visualize yourself standing in front of the room, voice steady, eye contact firm, each word carefully chosen. Picture yourself moving through the tension, saying what needs to be said, and walking away knowing you fulfilled your role. This isn't fantasy, it's cognitive priming, helping your brain familiarize itself with a situation, so when the real moment arrives, it doesn't panic. The brain resists what's unfamiliar and relaxes when it recognizes a scenario. Smart communicators under pressure don't speak faster to escape discomfort. They slow down because they know speed is the enemy of poise. They use short sentences, clear words, and well-timed pauses. That deliberate pace doesn't just help the audience follow, it helps them regain their own breath. In heightened emotional states, controlling the speed of your voice is how you regain control of the space. If someone becomes aggressive, instead of reacting defensively, the composed communicator pauses and asks a question. I hear you're really dissatisfied. What's most important to you right now? A single question like that can shift the energy from confrontation to dialogue. When you respond with curiosity instead of counterattack, you not only de-escalate tension, you reclaim the position of leadership in the conversation. When asked a tough question, don't rush to answer just to fill the silence. A short pause to think won't make you look weak. It shows the listener that you're thoughtful and respectful. People who speak in a hurry often dilute their message. Those who know how to slow down and respond with precision and timing are perceived not just as intelligent, but as composed under fire. In a tense dialogue, your voice isn't a weapon to win. It's a tool to maintain balance. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You only need to maintain a steady tone, consistent pacing, and unshaken eye contact. Others will regulate their emotions in response to you if you maintain a grounded frequency. But if you let their tension sweep you up, you've handed over the steering wheel without realizing it. Practice is the key. You can't wait until you're in the storm to learn how to stand still. Train in small scenarios. Practice speaking clearly when interrupted. Practice staying calm when questioned. Practice taking a breath before you respond. Practice writing down 3 key points and delivering them 3 different ways. Every repetition brings you closer to the version of yourself who can communicate powerfully, even with a racing heart. And finally, remember this: What people carry with them after a difficult conversation isn't the exact words you used, it's the feeling you left them with in the most intense moments. Did you show them calm they could trust? Did you maintain respect despite disagreement? Could you stand in the fire without burning yourself or the person across from you? If so, then you're not just a good speaker, you are a true communicator, one who creates lasting influence where it matters most. Persuasion isn't about getting people to do what you want. It's the ability to help them voluntarily shift their mindset, attitude, or behavior without feeling manipulated. The difference between pressure and influence lies here. One pushes with force, the other opens doors with finesse. That's the essence of masterful persuasion. No coercion, no control, just clarity, sincerity, and focus. If you want to influence someone, start by making them feel heard. Entering a conversation with the mindset of "I must win" is the fastest way to lose, because the moment your ego takes the front seat, connection takes the back. People instinctively resist when they feel imposed upon, but if they sense that you genuinely care about what they think, that you're open to understanding the reason behind their resistance, that you take time to clarify what's unclear to them, you unlock their willingness to change without ever needing to push. For an idea to be accepted, it must pass through two gates: logic and emotion. Smart communicators don't just explain with reason, they guide listeners from feeling to awareness with emotional clarity. They don't say, "You're wrong." They say, "I used to think that way too." And from there, they share a personal experience that shifted their view, allowing the listener to feel like a companion on the journey, not an opponent. That sense of shared ground lowers the walls and opens the mind. Guild persuasion rarely leans on phrases like "I think" or "I believe." Instead, effective communicators center the listener. Have you ever felt this way? Do you notice this happening to you? This might make your days feel less draining. These open-ended questions place the listener at the heart of the dialogue, and when they feel that what you're offering benefits them, agreement becomes far more natural. Influence doesn't require many words, just the right ones at the right moment. One well-timed sentence can untangle an entire conflict. One steady glance can neutralize rising anger. Influential people don't try to control conversations. They guide the space through grounded presence. They don't force anyone to change, but when they speak, others feel inspired to change themselves. No lasting influence is built on fear. Anything you compel through pressure might work short-term, but it leaves behind hurt, doubt, even hidden resistance. On the other hand, when you make people feel seen, understood, and trusted, they want to hear you again. And from that moment on, your influence stretches far beyond that one conversation. It enters their thinking, their feelings, and eventually their actions. What matters most isn't what you say, it's how you make them feel after you've spoken. Did they feel uplifted, empowered to choose for themselves? Did they feel you were a companion, not a commander? If yes, then you weren't just persuading, you were sowing deep, rightful influence. People with true influence don't silence opposing views. They listen, distill, and respond with respect. They don't say, "I'm right, you're wrong." They say, "We might both be right, just from different angles." That recognition softens opposition. It tells the other person they're not being erased, they're being invited into a real discussion. And once they feel invited, you no longer have to drag them in. Don't confuse aggression with strength. A loud voice doesn't create deep impact. What changes someone's thinking isn't domination, it's the subtle way you frame a question. One well-placed inquiry can open up an entirely new horizon. One intentional pause can shift more than a lengthy argument ever will. Those who truly influence don't strive to prove. They awaken what already exists within, but has yet to be stirred. To persuade without pressure, you must be firm in mindset and gentle in delivery. Don't get swept up in emotion. Don't slip into debate. Don't cling to being right. The goal isn't to win the logic war. It's to invite natural alignment. And that's only possible when you stop seeing the other person as a barrier and start seeing them as someone in a different stage of understanding, needing guidance, not correction. Finally, remember, true influence doesn't come from power. It comes from respect. When you respect your listener, even if they don't yet agree with you, you plant a seed that may bloom tomorrow. When you step back, instead of pushing harder, you create the space for them to step forward on their own. And that's the most sustainable form of persuasion, not through words, but through character. People don't remember data, they remember emotion. They aren't moved by sharp logic the way they are drawn into a story, a space where they see themselves struggle, survive, and grow. A great speaker might make you nod, but a smart storyteller can make you change direction. That's why storytelling is never just decoration, it's a weapon, the most powerful emotional weapon an effective communicator can wield. In a world where everyone is trying to say something, the one who knows how to tell a story with depth and truth is the one who makes others stop and truly listen. A story doesn't have to be long or elaborate.
It just needs a soul. It needs to carry a real experience, a lived emotion, a truth that cannot be faked. Because only when you touch honesty within yourself can you reach something true in someone else. A good story doesn't just inspire, it builds an invisible bridge between speaker and listener. When you say, "I used to be afraid too," you bring people closer. When you say, "I failed, but I learned this," you unlock a door that reason alone cannot open. The listener no longer feels like you're talking down to them. They feel you've walked through fear, disappointment, and pain just like they have, and that makes you credible in the deepest sense. Smart storytelling isn't about sounding good. It's about choosing the right details. You don't have to put your whole life on stage. One moment is enough. A glance, a sentence, a single tear, if it carries emotional weight. Great storytellers know how to trim. They don't say everything. They say enough. They leave just enough space for the listener to fill in the rest with their own memories, emotions, and meaning. That's why people remember. Don't tell a story like a flashback. Tell it like you're reliving it right now. Walk them through it step by step. The eyes you saw, the words you heard, the tightness in your chest when facing a choice. When you tell it with full presence, your audience will meet you there. They're no longer just listening, they're experiencing. And that experience is what sticks. Don't fear vulnerability in your story. It's the raw, imperfect, sometimes clumsy parts that make others see themselves in you. People don't connect to polished ideals. They connect to the truth. They don't need you to always be strong. They need to know how weak you once were and how you walked through it. A wound told from a place of healing carries more strength than any theoretical lesson. A story is also where your message lives, not as a sermon, not as a speech, but as a whisper left at the end. I realized it wasn't the situation holding me back, it was how I thought about it. I learned the thing I feared losing most was never worth clinging to, and from that day I lived differently. A soft ending, but one that echoes long after. Smart storytellers don't use stories just to inform, but to awaken. They don't force the listener to draw the same conclusion. They guide them to see themselves and let the reflection do the work. They don't push a message, they unlock awareness. That's why listeners don't just feel convinced, they feel grateful. Grateful to have seen themselves through a new lens. But storytelling isn't just for stages. It's a tool for leading meetings,
persuading partners, inspiring teams, bonding in relationships, parenting, healing, and above all, connecting human to human. One well-timed story can shift the direction of a lost soul. It can be light for someone doubting their worth. And sometimes, just one honest retelling is enough to help someone believe it's not too late to begin again. If you want to become a communicator of real influence, don't collect fancy words. Learn to tell one true story. A small story told from an unguarded heart with a clear mind and full presence. That's not just a skill, that's power. Because in the end, people don't live by reasons, they live by emotion. And a good story is the arm that carries that emotion exactly where it needs to go. Smart communications isn't a trick you pull out to impress others. It's not a skill you switch on only when stepping on stage or entering a high-stakes meeting. If you only use it when it benefits you, you're limiting your own influence. Because communication is not a performance, it is the continuous expression of your presence, shaped by how you think, feel, and treat others in every ordinary moment. And once you understand that, you stop practicing communication to shine in moments and start building it as a way of life that leaves lasting impact.
You cannot separate your words from who you are. Your tone, your gaze, your breath, your language, your focus, all of it reflects who you are in that moment. The smart communication doesn't come from tactics, it comes from inner clarity. When you live with clarity, you speak with clarity. When you live with purpose, your words carry weight. When you live with kindness, people feel safety in the very way you speak. Communication is not something you add, it is the natural result of a person who has been sharpened from the inside out. If you want smart communication to become your lifestyle, begin with the smallest details. How you say thank you, how you apologize, how you respond when misunderstood, how you stay silent when someone needs to speak. These are not performances, they are automatic responses formed by your internal values. When you choose to live with thoughtfulness, you don't need to try to communicate thoughtfully. Every word you speak will naturally carry maturity, compassion, and credibility. Communication is not a jacket you put on to look professional. It is your skin, the outer layer of your truest self. And that skin cannot be faked. You can't speak with elegance if your mind is in chaos. You can't inspire others if you are filled with doubt. You cannot earn someone's trust if you haven't first learned how to be honest with yourself. Words only carry weight when they are rooted in a stable, strong internal foundation. Because people don't just listen to what you say, they feel who you are in the silences between your words. Someone who lives with smart communication is someone who knows how to manage the emotional space they create. They don't speak to vent anger, to be right, or to impress. They speak to connect, to clarify, to illuminate, to heal. They know when to step forward, when to step back, and when to stay quiet so others can hear themselves.
And this doesn't happen when communication is used as a tool for personal gain. It only happens when communication is seen as a way to live with higher quality day by day. Don't wait for a special occasion to speak with grace. Practice it daily in casual conversations with friends, colleagues, strangers, and especially with yourself. Because the language you use with yourself directly shapes how you speak to the world. If you often criticize yourself, you'll easily attack others. If you learn to be kind to yourself, you'll become someone who soothes others in their storms. That's why refined communication always begins within. When you make smart communication a lifestyle, you no longer need to impress, because your presence already commands quiet respect. You don't need to say much to be heard, because every word you say carries depth. You don't need to convince, because how you live becomes your most persuasive argument. People with true inner strength don't need to dramatize their speech. Their stillness alone makes others fall silent and pay attention.
Because powerful communication doesn't come from volume, it comes from the quality that radiates from your very being. Communication doesn't end when the conversation ends. It leaves a residue in the mind of the listener. A wise communicator plants something of value in others, a feeling of being understood, a new flicker of hope, a gentle reminder, a quiet awakening. And to do that, you can't rely on occasional effort. You must live this way every day. Thoughtful communication isn't a goal, it's the byproduct of a life refined by awareness, compassion, and personal responsibility. And finally, remember this: you won't only be remembered for what you've achieved, but for how you made people feel after encountering you. That impact doesn't come from reputation, money, or appearance. It comes from the way you speak, and more importantly, from how you live behind your words. Smart communication isn't a moment of brilliance. It is a steady, quiet light illuminating your actions, your relationships, and your choices every single day.